We don't often talk about Beeching on this channel. It can be a bit political, a bit divisive. The Beeching Axe, the destruction of the railways. However, today's video is a good example of how the destruction of the railways probably began 100 years or so before Beeching ever wielded his axe. To my left just there is a GWR main line from Paddington to Bristol, opened in 1840, and towns all the way around here felt the presence of the railways and how they could benefit their community, their towns, bring business and prosperity. So branch lines were proposed up and down this area. Watlington was one such town. An extremely poor road network, described as having the worst road network in the 1830s in this area. No navigable waterways to speak of for 6 or 7 miles. The railway connection was what it really needed. It's come 1861, the Watlingting and Wallingford Railway was proposed. Watlington was about to get its first railway connection and prosperity was on the cards. Or was it? Welcome to the story of how Beeching perhaps wasn't the real problem for the railways. So with this proposal in 1861, well, the line would have gone from here in Cholsley all the way up to Prince's Risborough, and it would connect all the towns and villages along the route. Despite the financial crisis looming around the corner for the townsfolk, well, this would be a time of prosperity. They were going to get a railway. So for those of you that have been subscribed for a while to the channel, you know that we like to tick off every disused station. So I've got a list of all the stations that we're going to look at and a load of pictures, so I can try and compare like for like as our journey progresses up to Prince's Risborough, northeast of here. 1866, and the railway reached Wallingford, which is just there behind me, the now end of the line for the Heritage Railway. But of course, you wanted to get a train to Watlington further on the line, well, you couldn't, because remember that financial crisis we talked about earlier? Well, that had now gripped the nation and nobody really wanted to stump up their cash. The line had reached there and no further. I say there, the station was actually a bit further down the hill, the ironically named Beeching Road or Beeching Drive. But yeah, 1866, that was as far as the line was going to get, and it was looking likely it was going to go no further. So as I continue my journey northeast towards Prince's Risborough, well, there are no lines to be seen, no embankments, no cuttings or otherwise. But according to my next location, I'm looking for a station called Watlington. So they did have a station. So where did that come from? Because it certainly wasn't from the Wallingford and Cholsley direction. So behind me you've got the Ridgeway, which spans quite a section of the south of England. Really beautiful, even on a cloudy day like this. Now, just here, I think to my north, I've got an old chimney sticking out of the trees there. And if my research is correct, there's some old remains looking rather sketchy. I don't know how much will come out on camera, but you can still see the old remains of Watlington Station. Watlington didn't connect with Wallingford. I'll tell you why in a second. In 1868, the solicitors of the Wallingford and Watlington line informed them that the rival line was to be placed before Parliament. That line would connect Prince's Risborough to Watlington. Now, for the good folk and very patient folk of Watlington, this was great news. That just seemed really odd. Why would you build a line all the way from Prince's Risborough right down to Watlington and not connect it just that few more miles to Wallingford? I think we're going to need to do a little bit of digging. First of all though, we're looking for Aston Rowant. I think just down there. A couple of remains at the start, some old track. The line was just down there at the bottom of this garden. We can follow it now bit further along the line up towards another heritage centre, second heritage centre of the day. Okay, I'm not sure how much of the station we're going to see of Aston Rowant, but we can certainly have a look at the track bed, which is just through here. Now that's not the most exciting view you'd ever seen. It does feel quite good to be clambering about in the hedge as always. And right ahead of me there would have been the site of the old station. So this is a nice tick, despite there being no remains. Aston Rowant. I will leave Aston Rowant behind. Just check in here just to make sure we aren't missing anything. And when you do dig a bit deeper into the origins of this line, well, it was going to cost £36,000. Not a great deal, that's good news. No major viaducts, tunnels, no big earthworks, relatively simple line. £28,000 of that £36,000 came from two individuals. The Earl of Macclesfield, who inherited his earldom. He was Tory peer, MP, and a chap called Thomas Taylor. Now, Thomas Taylor was a exceedingly wealthy cotton manufacturer from the north, and he'd now settled here in the south, looking to make another dollar or two, it seemed. I think that tells you where this line was going with regards to what it was for. Industry, perhaps, rather than people. So this is part of the Ridgeway track, even though the Ridgeway is up there with a dark cloud in the distance behind it. Quite the image. I love how this line sort of sits underneath that Ridgeway all the way. Now the line itself is just here, and we've followed it for quite a while now, since Aston Rowant. And you can always see just about a foot and a half of embankment. That's it, nothing else. And here's a little old crossing point. I can show you exactly what I mean, what I've been seeing for the last mile or so. Yeah, I mean, you can get in this bit of the track bed. Right. I can show you exactly what I mean. So down there you've got maybe a bit more than a foot and a half, 2 foot, but this is sort of classic earthwork for this railway, it seems. A couple of feet raised, that's it. Nothing serious, nothing in terms of embankments, cuttings of great significance. Now we're just coming up to another halt. It's our second halt of 4 that were opened after 1900. I think this is 1906, Kingston Crossing halt. Highly likely that by that time GWR were thinking numbers, dwindling, struggling, lack of money, etc. Here is the crossing, another road up to the Ridgeway, and I think here would be the halt. So next up is Chinnor. Chinnor, despite closing, as with the rest of the line, to passengers in 1957, that continued seeing traffic in a freight capacity until 1989. I think there was a cement works nearby which kept that alive, and of course now it's home to the end of the Heritage Railway. Chinnor and Prince's Risborough. I think we're a little bit too early in the season for those sort of shenanigans, but we'll leave that to another day. Oh, we're nearly at the end of this line. Not quite, because at the end of the line there's a really bizarre story. I've literally just missed 2 halts, impossible to get to unless you walk miles. Wain Hill opened in 1925 and Bedlow Bridge halt. Now They both really underline the demise of this railway. Opened again as later halts by GWR to try and rescue it, bring on more passengers. By that time, the business and the freight that had been promised early on by the businessmen, it had dwindled, long since dwindled, if it ever existed at all. And the infrastructure that this railway needed was like so many other branch lines. In fact, the station master from Bedlow on the line that's here, which is a different line altogether, Oxford, Tame and Princess Risborough line, well, Bedlow station master had to look after the station here, the halt here, Bedlow as well. He was responsible for the paraffin lamps and all sorts of bits and pieces. And that shows to you the failure of the branch lines in this country and many others. The infrastructure was huge, and a bus could go to every street corner. It could go to the centre of towns. So many of these lines built early, they didn't really care about the towns they were serving. They're a mile away from them. And that shows you, certainly in this instance, how branch lines like this were never going to survive and compete. As ever, Sustrans have done a great route on top on that Oxford, Tame, Princess Risborough line. We're trying to find the route adjacent to it. Hi sheep. Adjacent to it, because that goes down to our junction where our line meets this line. You can see in the hedge there's a big old bridge abutment. Oh god, they're all running at me, literally running at me. So here, right here, is where the junction was. So you out of Princess Risborough, come along this Oxford line and then hang a left and you'd be able to go down our line. But when the line opened, you couldn't, or at least when they wanted it to be opened, they couldn't. So they invited Colonel Rich from the Board of Trade. Not heard of him before. We normally prefer Yolland. So Colonel Rich said, well, look, you've got your junction here, but it doesn't actually link up to the line. So you've just got effectively a standalone line with no junction. So that's not possible. You can't do that. There's no station here. There's no provision for trains to stop at all. It was like there wasn't even a consideration for those, the owners of the line. And Colonel Rich said, well, I'll come back. So he did come back a few months. And he said, look, you've made some repairs, but you still haven't connected it to the main line. A few months later, they did eventually connect it to the main line and had a proper junction in its proper sense, and you could reach Princess Risborough. But again, within a year, they said, oh wow, it's not really working out. It's making a profit though. Perhaps you, GWR, would like to lease it from us for £600 a year. When GWR looked at the books, well, it turns out the line really wasn't making any money. In fact, it was losing £800 in that first year. So a little bit of underhand tactics there from our friends Thomas Taylor and the Earl of Macclesfield. So I had hoped to bring you a lot more. I had hoped to bring you the junction where you could see the line peel off. But unfortunately, it looks like it's actually still in use as storage, albeit quite old storage, so I can't do that, frustratingly. But I guess this line really, for me, epitomises why the railways failed in the 40s, 50s and 60s, because essentially they already had failed. No joined up thinking whatsoever in the early years of the railways. 1866 we're talking about for this line, and the directors were just allowed to get on with it and basically fudge it. They didn't even connect another 3 miles further south from Watlington onto Wallingford, and maybe that wouldn't have solved this line. Maybe it would still have been closed by Beeching, but at least it would have given it a fighting chance, and at least it would have been for people rather than just their own pockets. I've been Paul. I've been a bit grumpy, but blame that on the weather. I'll see you this time next week. Thanks for watching, everybody.